Hello, and welcome to Hold This Thought, a podcast where I invite you to hold on to thoughts that you might not have had before. Each week, I sit across from a new guest, and we talk life, ideas, and ponder the questions that make us think twice. I hope you enjoy the show.
All right. Maybe we started. We'll know. We'll see. One of the things that I learned yesterday being at your house, thank you for hosting, by the way. We had our baby dedication for Chloe Grace, and thank you for hosting. One of the things I learned about us as brothers is that, well, we all carry bits and pieces of our parents with us, right? That's probably true for all kids everywhere. But when I walked into your basement, I immediately thought, this looks like Dad's garage. Our entire life.
Honestly,
and I have
so long to try and get it cleaned up. Yeah.
I have a room exactly like that. It is like my shop. When I first moved in, I organized it and everything. And then just over 3 years, that's the room where I finished like a construction project or like hanging a picture. And I just like dump things in that room. And it's luckily there's a door I can just shut it and I never have to go in there. But when I was walking your basement, I was like, okay, so this is like a shared trait among the siblings.
Yeah.
I don't get to go to your house too often.
No.
What do you have a room like that where you just like? Actually, I do remember your garage looks just like Dad's. You just like you, at least a year and a half, 2 years ago when I was there, you just shoved stuff in there. Is that still the case, or do you like organize it every now and then?
So, the garage is kind of a wreck right now because we were going to go through a move that ended up not happening. So we've still got like half boxes that are kind of down the center of the garage, and then I've got tools around the outside. There's the garage fridge that's in there, some shelving, and then some other miscellaneous storage. So it's very different, I think, than when you were there, but still very much cluttered at the moment.
I think if it makes you feel any better about having stuff in boxes, we still have at least 2 or 3 boxes from our original move. Caitlin and I, my wife and I, where it was from the basement that we lived in when we were first married to our townhome that they're still boxed up for like 6 years. Yeah. So, some of it's just going to stay in boxes. It's just how it is.
Yeah. It's not the only thing. I'm actually, a lot of times I'm looking at, when we're all three of us together, I look at something you'll do or something you'll say, and I'm like, oh, that's something that Mom would do, or Mom would say, or that's something that Dad would do. And I'm comparing, not in like a negative way, but just in like it has a portion of admiration. Like, wow, this is something that comes from our parents in some form or fashion, and it's been transferred to us through the genes or through seeing it in place. And so, I just noticed that yesterday when we were at your house for that luncheon, is that it seems we all have a room where we just like, we have that piece of Dad in us.
Yeah.
Is the point. Like, and there are other things too. That's not necessarily a negative or a positive. It's maybe more neutral. But we just, we carry those bits and pieces of our heritage. And I think it's an often overlooked component of heritage is the nuanced small things like that. Like, we have a room where we store tools and pianos from 100 years ago, and basketballs that are deflated with holes in them that will never be used again, and just things that we may need one day. And that might even come from Grand Mary.
I think that's the key. Yeah, because most of that stuff down there is stuff that I probably will never use. It's cables that are for game systems that are gone, or like a tube amp that I bought 10 years ago that I was super into audio, and then I haven't played with it since. I played with it for like a month and listened to like Ben Howard and stuff, and that was it. And then I put it in a box and it sat there. It's stuff like that, where those are projects or things that I was really passionate about. And I'm like, I'll pick that up again. I need that in case something happens, or in case I ever want to do that. And it's sad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to know where your junk drawer is in your house.
Ours is in the kitchen. It's the biggest drawer in the kitchen, and it's filled with papers.
Great pick.
Everything. I mean, absolutely everything you can think of is in there.
Could be the smallest one.
Yeah. No.
I definitely have like laid claim, like Napoleon conquering the lands of his neighboring countries. I've laid claim to a drawer when we moved in. Joy, my beautiful and loving wife, is a excellent organizer. So she will organize the junk drawer like on a rotating like I will clutter it over weeks and months, and then she will go back and organize it. So we have it kind of like a nice balance where it never gets to where you remember growing up where you would like try to close that junk drawer after like getting one thing out. And then for some reason, everything didn't. Yeah, everything was not the way you left, like you found it, and something you could not close it. Yeah, something grew. There was some sort of
trying to escape.
It caught oxygen, so it expanded the contents inside, and you can't close it. It's like jam packed. For some reason, we've never had that issue. Joy has these little wooden organizers in there, and there are still random things we'll never use, like towelette wipes from Taco Mac, like don't know why they're in there, but she's like, we're gonna put these in this nice little spot here in case we need them one day, and I do appreciate that. I will tend to clutter it up, but it quickly becomes organized because Joy has this skill to organize things constantly. I was gonna ask you, he's mentioned the cables. Mine is just random tools. What's the one thing or group of items in your garage where you have noticed it will collect dust, and you think you'll need it one day, but if you like really stop and think about it, you're like, I'm never going to use this again. Do you have that thing in there?
In the front left corner of the garage is like miscellaneous. So there is propane tank, both full and empty. There is fishing poles and fishing gear. There's a shelf with stakes that may or may not ever be used, both metal and wood. Just junk. There's like the grass catcher that goes on the back of the lawnmower. That is the landing spot for all things not used semi-regularly, semi-annually. It just collects there, and then I go through it, and I'm like, well, yeah, maybe one day, and it just goes right back to its spot. So,
yeah.
When you said steak, definitely I was thinking meat.
Yeah.
I was like, you're like drying meat in your garage.
No, there's a freezer for that.
Yeah,
I do have a drop
I was
freezer.
very surprised, and then the context hit. I was like, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. No, we've done some landscaping, so there's like a wooden partition for part of the yard because on one side of my house the sun never hits it for like 2 months a year. So we dropped a bunch of river rock, and I put in some beams to kind of hold that back. And so I bought a variety of different stakes to test which one I liked the most, and I only ended up using one. And I will never take anything back to the store ever.
Why return it? You might need it one day.
I might need it one day. I've already got it, so let's just hang on to it it's paid for. Let's hang on to it for a decade.
Yeah.
Anna is like, no, let's take back Nate Bergatsky has a bit about his wife that takes things back. She'll like return groceries or whatever. That's Anna. Anna will take back anything. Like, oh, we didn't eat these apples. Let's take them back. And I'm like, okay. I'm not going to, but if you feel free, if you'd like to do that.
Your story about the steaks, it reminds me of the time a year and a half ago, probably it was, when we had the honor of going to Grandmary's house, our recently passed grandmother, and helping my dad and his brother kind of clear out a lot of her items. She was the matriarch of long-term storage in our family. And
what a way to say that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just, it's a great way to say that.
Yeah. She had things, for context, because, nobody here, listening would probably know this, but, she had a house, a normal, modest house, but then she had the way the properties, and all the properties on this road are built this way, they're very long, like a long, thin rectangle. So the property line is not that wide this way, but it's extremely long in its access, like this way, from the street to the back of the property. So she viewed that as an opportunity for storage, and it was something that was, I think, it's passed on. I mean, to us, we maybe don't have the same amount of, each of us don't have the same amount of dirt on our land to store the stuff, but she had tractors, and she had storage, like huge storage houses full of stuff from, when we were going through it, we saw things from I remember seeing these tapes, like cassette tapes from 1940, maybe not the 40s, but like 1960, 1970, these sermons that were preached on it, and paint buckets, and all these items and random things that perhaps she thought she would need one day. And that, Dad did that. And I think we all, at least in some small way, have done that and have adopted that with the garage miscellaneous section and the cables in the basement. And for me, it's my tool section. It's interesting to look at how a part of that is definitely hereditary. Like, there has to be a component where there is a part, where you're watching subconsciously, consciously, you're seeing the way it happens in your life and your grandparents' life and maybe your dad or your parents' life. but there has to be a part of that that's hereditary. I'm curious your guys' thoughts on like that ratio, that balance. Like, what do you think? How do you think that like would play out?
Well, you're getting into like nature versus nurture. And so a lot of that is just modeling behavior. So you've got your parents setting an example of how things are done, and then kids are then observing that, they're absorbing that, and then they're kind of just consciously or subconsciously, the way you put it, putting it into practice.
I think so. I think a lot of it is also nature as well, or like a tendency to say like, I want to keep these things around. These things either have value to me, like personally, because it's something that I associate with someone or an event in my life, or it's something that like I think I'm going to have a real use for, like the stakes or cables for game systems I'm never going to buy or set up again.
Yeah.
But it's still something where it's like, this feels like it has a utility. And I want to make sure that I can retain that utility, especially for someone like me. I think like the value of the money that I spend feels like a byproduct of my time. So when I think about buying something, it's directly related to the cost of my time. And when I'm giving something away, I'm then losing the time that I invested in that object, not to mention any memories or associations that I might have with that might be personal. Mm-hmm. So I think that's one of the reasons why I keep things, is because it feels like it's a function of my utility of my time. So when I lose that, I'm losing something that costs me time. And to me, time feels like the most valuable currency. It's the one thing that we cannot get back.
Absolutely.
As we spend time, it's gone.
It's the one thing you can't recuperate.
Yep.
I wonder if what you just shared is maybe how all three of us feel without having that language prior to this moment, and how maybe our dad felt and our grandmother felt, and the thousands and millions of other people who deal with that same thing. I think you make a good point with nature versus nurture. You've all seen the show Hoarders, where you have the film crew and the person on HGTV or whatever channel it is, like walking over piles of stuff in the house, and you have that old lady or old man just like laying on a pile of clothes and garbage and stuff. And there is a psychological component as well tied in. And I wouldn't go as far as to say that our family is that bad, where we're like living in just refuse and just like, a point beyond repair. It's maybe not that far. It's definitely a spectrum, I guess is the best way to put it. But I think you make a good point, is it possible that we all feel that way? We just never took the time to stop and think like, hey, I have associated these things with time it took. Sitting in my backyard are 8 to 10 planks from the deck that I built left over on my retaining wall. And I don't think there's a way to resell them. I haven't looked into it. It's not like a full amount for someone else to do a project, and I'm not going to throw them away. And maybe I could use them for repair one day. But in my head, maybe subconsciously, as you're saying that, I'm associating the countless hours to build that, rebuild that deck. It probably took me 50 to 60 hours of work and labor and research and just saw cut after saw cut and putting it all together. And so maybe there is a subconscious part where, and that's just an example, right, of all the things in our life where we would keep things around that maybe it's like someone who doesn't have that attachment to it would come in, a third party would just walk in and be like, why is that sitting there? Like, you can just get rid of that. It's like the project's done, the thing is over, the game system will never be used again. You'll never need to stake those other type of stakes that you didn't use. You won't need that again. But there is an element, I think, tied into that where there is this irrational, like I'm looking at myself when I say that, and probably everyone else, there's an irrational attachment to the thing that someone who doesn't have that connection, whether it's time or whether it's emotion. I know with our grandmother, there's a lot of emotion with the things that she kept, both in her house and in her backyard in these storage sheds. Some of the things like the cassette tapes from sermons, from maybe those were things that really meant a lot to her when she was coming up and going through a lot of the challenges in her life. And then maybe the paint buckets is just like, arbitrary things. So it's definitely a mixed bag. But I think you make a great point. And the nature versus nurture thing is good too, because there is a dual component of what you see in your environment versus maybe how you're wired. And I think at least for the three of us, we share that wiring of
we got a little bit of Granny Mary.
Yeah, we got a little bit of Granny Mary.
Just a touch,
we got just a dash. Just a dash.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being here. I'm glad you guys are here.
Excited to be here. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, this is the first episode where I've had 3 guests, and it came with its share of technical, not challenges. What's the word? It came with its share of new mountains to climb for me on designing the show. I mean, as you guys know, I'm not like these huge podcasters where I have a team of people offset, editing the videos, setting up the production crew. I'm what is called in this world like a solo producer or a solo creator. That's the word, solo creator. So I edit the videos, I set up the equipment, and I was blessed to hire a good friend of mine to help me set up the studio when I first launched it. But since adding this iteration of a third camera or a microphone and third headset and adding the extra person, there was some challenges with that. But I'm glad we were able to get it to work and all be able to be in this space. So thank you for being here. I wanted you guys to just take a second and give like a 2-minute bio on your background, on who you are, what you do. Yeah.
Okay. You got it. Go for it.
Why me? I always got to go first.
Because you're the oldest. You got to carry the mantle for us.
So I am currently in education. I've been in education for the last 10, going on 11 years. I've coached a variety of high school athletics. I attended Samford and Shorter University. We've lived in 3 different states, Florida, Georgia, and Alabama. We currently live in a suburb of Huntsville, Alabama. We love living there. It's a great town. Family's really flourished since we moved there. So that's it.
My turn?
Yeah.
All right. So I'm a husband to 1, father to 2. We live in Tequila, so right up the road from here. So I've been in cybersecurity since really I graduated, so around 2019, 2020 timeframe. I attended ASU. I was actually at GGC before that and really struggled being in person and really found that ASU was a great school for me, a place where I could learn, I could be online, and I could be async. And as long as I have communication with professors, I can really get done what I need to get done. And then have worked at small businesses, large businesses, mostly in like cloud environments. And then particularly with AI and cybersecurity, a lot of stuff is coming up right now. So it's a very exciting time. And I'm very blessed to be in security at the time that I am.
Yeah. It's a crazy world for security. And I know that is something that shadows both of your worlds because security has a direct handhold with AI and its implications in our world as it's growing more and more prevalent across all age groups. I mean, you think about in history, the accessibility to knowledge and information, right? The older, I was sharing this with someone recently, the older you get, the more knowledge and wisdom you obtain. And there's usually, for thousands of years, there's this mentor-mentee relationship, master-apprentice relationship. I think the common example that comes to mind for me, maybe it's because it relates to my interest group of lore and video games and high fantasy, is the blacksmith master and the blacksmith apprentice, right? For thousands of years, that type of relationship was prevalent, but now you're entering a world, and I know that you can understand this at being in education, where it's not quite replaced it yet, but it's on the verge of replacing that model, which translates to everything in life, investing in the stock market and medical professions and lawyer professions and starting a business. Even people have mentors and starting a business. Like everything has always applied to this mentor-mentee relationship, whether that's one-on-one or group focused. But now you have this shift where knowledge is becoming accessible to the 12-year-old. They can act, if they know the right questions to ask, or they have the idea, they can find that information and bypass that system entirely. So I'm curious, I guess we'll start with the education side, like being an educator, being someone who has taught at multiple levels of education, both in high school and even in college, the college level. How have you seen in the past just like 2 to 3 years, AI changing the way your students interact with information, how they interact with knowledge and with learning? What's that journey been like for you as an educator?
That's a great question. I'm going to start by saying I'm going to catch flack from how you open versus how I open, because you referenced being a dad and a husband, and I did not. So thanks for that.
You're welcome.
And then secondly, I don't think you could find 3 more different people that were raised in the same house and are of the same bloodline sitting at the same table having a conversation.
That's a good point.
So as we were going through the bios, I was like, yeah, we are so different, but we are.
We have a lot of similarities still.
We really do. Yeah. To answer your question about AI and how it's currently affecting education from my perspective as a high school teacher, middle school teacher, you have kids leaning on it a lot more. You always, I think, had kids going to the internet for substance, for information. Now the result seems to be I don't want to say watered down, because I feel like you do get qualitative answers from AI, but you do get a version of it that maybe is more surface, depending on the content that you're trying to get the student to learn. I've told this story before, I think, to you guys, but I'll reference it here. So I was down at an AP conference in Tuscaloosa, and it's kind of just like here's how we're framing content. Here's some strategies you can use. Basically just to overhaul on some of your pedagogy. But there was one segment of the conference that I found really interesting, and he was I don't want to misrepresent who he was, but from my memory, he was the officer of maybe AI integrity or something for the university, or maybe for the education segment. And he got up on his allotted time and began to talk about how students are using AI. And that's how he started his segment of the conference. And he said, these are all the tools they're using. This is what we do. And he actually referenced that at the undergrad level, they're allowed to cite their conversation with ChatGPT, Claude, whoever, AI. And that can be a part of their, air quote, research for whatever it is they're doing. And then he backloaded his segment of time with giving teacher strategies for how to incorporate AI. So, like, for example, it was my first time ever teaching AP. And he said, look, you can go into, I think the program we used was Magic School. So he's like, you can take your rubric, you can put it directly into the conversation piece, or create your own, I guess, organic, fresh, I don't even know what you would call it, that segment that you kind of program the AI to think in a specific way. You guys know what I'm talking about?
Like a prompt, like a pre-prompt.
There you go.
Something
Like that, yeah.
Like the tone you want it to give you back.
Yeah, probably.
Something
Yeah,
like that.
I think that probably best describes it. So you can put the rubric in and put the prompt that the student has answered minus the student's specific personal data, so just their writing, and then it would essentially give you a grade based on the numerical scale for the prompt that you gave it. And so I tried it out a little bit, and then I kind of asked for feedback from the students, like, hey, what do you think about your grade on this one? And I let them know I was doing it. He's like, and they were like, oh, well, some of them were like super fired up. You good?
My microphone just fell, or a component of it. Keep going.
Okay, so it was, I asked for their feedback, how accurate did you feel? Some were like, I feel like this is very accurate. And some were like, I did not like the fact that you used
AI
that to grade my paper.
Yep.
And I was like, mixed reviews on it, my early use of it. But I say all that to say this, that I think that it's definitely a growing, I don't want to say concern, because it's become so much of everyone's daily life, whether you're in business analytics, coaching even, which athletic coach is what I've done for the last 10 years alongside education. It's the reason I'm in education. But it is definitely on the daily use for a lot of students.
I think there's a lot to unpack there. One of the key concerns that I have regarding like AI in general is that when it's no longer like assistive. So in my mind, like the best case scenario for AI is it is integrated in most of what we do, but it like by design is assistive. So meaning that it's not necessarily creating everything for you, but it's something that says like, hey, I'm looking at your paper and I've determined you've made some grammatical errors. This is actually an incorrect citation. This is other information you might want to include, as like an example of a student writing a paper or thinking about even medicine. So like, hey, this is the prescription that you wrote. Just so you know, these are the side effects. This is how it's going to work when they cut that prescription. This is stuff that they're already on. Make sure to okay it, double check, something like that. That's what I think. I think that by and large, what we're going to see is it's going to move to assistive. I think that's also a byproduct of people not wanting to lose their jobs. So I think legislation will come in and ensure that. But also, like, I don't really trust an AI singularly to make decisions on things like maybe the quality of a paper, the medicine that I'm given, or the code that it generates for me at work. We definitely do not, I know some companies do, much to like a lot of fanfare. Either they're really proud that they're shipping AI-produced code, or that they're not reviewing their code and it's going out. And then you see horror stories where like production databases are gone, where for those who don't know, that essentially means that like all of your customer data is deleted, and without other like backup processes and stuff like that, it's not really recoverable. But that being said, I think that as an assistive function, I think that's where we will end up. And I think that's going to be the best possible scenario. I think the worst possible scenario is when we begin to outsource our thinking. So like thinking about students saying like, well, I don't really want to write this paper. Maybe I'll put out a few bullet points of like, I need to write a paper on Magellan. So I'm going to talk about Magellan. I'm going to talk about the year and just do bullet points quickly inside of ChatGPT or some other AI product, and then have it write out a 2-page paper for me.
Yeah.
And then maybe I'll go in and tweak it a little bit so that it doesn't really look like AI. It looks like me. And it's like maybe a little more difficult to detect with a scanner. I think that's really the concern that I see. And I think I'm mostly speaking for myself because I use it to write code at work. And there are times where I will have to really triple check myself, because the process of writing code becomes exponentially easier when we consider leveraging AI, and it allows for companies to move faster, particularly with lower headcount, which, maybe y'all aren't aware, maybe the listeners aren't aware. There's been something like over 100,000 like layoffs across tech companies across the board this year, mostly with the point being like, oh, well, we're AI now. We're all moving to AI. We're getting rid of people. And not to really, pivot it to tech, but it's definitely front of mind for me being in tech. But the point that I really was making is that like when we use AI for these things, it's very important not to outsource our thinking, and very important to still check and validate the output, particularly for things like, maybe medicine or maybe code generation, or even assisting writing papers and grading and things like that, which, I'm sure you do. And I do, I have to at work. And we have review systems that are really set up with tests and stuff. But something very front of mind to me is that like, from a philosophical perspective, we really cannot start to outsource our thinking to something that, is controlled by a handful of companies, controlled by a handful of people.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And that and that specific point to me is two faceted. You have the side of the coin where, in its current iteration today, AI hallucinates a lot. And there have been reports recently that it's being fixed or upgraded and not doing it as much. But it calls into question, how do I know the information I'm getting is accurate? How do I know the information that is being presented to me, whether it's researching for a paper or looking at the medicine I should take because I have this ailment? How do I know if it's accurate? There's a assumption that it's accurate, but you don't know for certain.
Yeah.
And so for me personally, as I guess a creative, I use it more for a bouncing board of ideas. And it has applications in code. It has applications in video and photo generation. It has applications in all sorts of things, task, like personal assistant, task automation stuff. There's a lot of things it can do very well, but instead of using it as a answer sheet, I use it as a way to bounce back ideas. I've shared this with some other guests before, but like when I'm building this, I'm throwing an idea I have into it. It spits its feedback, and then I iterate that idea for 6 or 7 times the way I would with like a friend, except this friend is available 24/7 and responds in an instant. And then from that, I form this idea with this like spit and regurgitate like process, and it helps me create something real by using it as a creative tool. And that's what I've loved most about it. And there are use cases where I do look for an empirical fact answer, like for instance, what temperature does the inside of a chicken need to be when I'm cooking it in the oven? And then that's probably something it won't hallucinate on because it's a very simple question, easily sourced across millions of data points in the internet, so it's not going to mess that up. But if I'm asking what temperature does jet fuel have to reach to make a rocket explode into the air, and it has a lot less data points to access that information because there's a lot less use cases for that in our world. Only a handful compared to the amount of times someone has written a recipe for chicken or whatever. The accessibility of those two data points as examples, it creates the opportunity for it to hallucinate more with something that has less data points on the internet, whereas something that's been sourced millions of times, like the internal temperature of that's safe to eat chicken, it gives it in my opinion, it gives it a less probability of hallucination when it has more data points to access for accurate information. And that's one facet. And the other facet is as students are using it more. And however, like you said, writing the paper and then changing things so it's not detectable when it gets scanned in, or it's not detectable by a teacher reading it, you have to look at it's not going away, right? Unless there's this like way to delete it off the internet, which is impossible, right? I get that idea because my wife and I just watched Mission Impossible Final Reckoning, and the plot of the movie is there's this AI. It's actually really creepy. It came out a year ago. This AI has been injected in the internet, and it's taking over the world, and it's hacking the nuclear warheads of all of the countries, the top countries that have nuclear warheads. And its goal is to capture all the nuclear warheads, hack into their databases, and then destroy the planet and rebuild with a small group that it controls. And so Tom Cruise, and Ethan Hunt is his name in the movie. His goal is to like stop this AI. And so you think about it morphing into that one day where it can infect the whole internet and it can infect the whole world and take over military systems and programs potentially. Obviously, it's a fictional example, but like, how do we move forward with something that we can't replace or can't get rid of today? You can't delete it. You can't remove it. And the technology we have today and what we have available to us, how do you move forward in society on the most foundational elements, like a student using it to write a paper, to the most like advanced applications of its use of missile guidance systems and military defense, and to get a little controversial, military attack capabilities, and how it can be used by countries to, with drones and other things, to target and be an aggressive form of combat, not just defensive. How do we make sense of its use case spread across those two extremes, base level to the most extreme, and everything in between? Like, how do we move forward with that like information?
There's a really, you say that, it kind of draws me back. Me and my wife watched The Pit. And there's an episode, I think it's season 2, where been a cyber attack on a hospital. And so they also shut down because they don't want to be at risk. And so they go, what's the term?
Dark.
Retro. It's like he uses
analog.
They go analog. So they go back to like whiteboard systems, paper copies, running paper charts. And it's got all of the new doctors that are just like shook up, like they don't understand what's going on. You've got all the old heads that are kind of driving the ship, and they actually bring in like I think she was retired to kind of help run operations, this old lady who's just cranky. She's a great character, cranky, and she's kind of, driving the boat. So I think that there is value in, number one, not letting it become a crutch, which is becoming increasingly more difficult because you have generations that are raised now with that being their norm. So not allowing it to become a crutch, but also still trying to drive value in, to not sound mystic, the old ways, right? Still having an understanding that, yes, it's current, yes, it's not going away, but there might be extenuating circumstances where we're going to need to know how things were done at one point so we don't lose where we're going.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack in both of those. I think the first thing that comes to mind, IBM wrote, I think it was a set of guidelines. It might have been a paper back in the 70s that was definitely talked about in undergrad, and I think in my master's program as well, which is like the number one thing that came out of it, which has kind of been this calling card for AI now, is never allow a computer to make a management decision. And they published it in the 70s. It was very before its time in the sense of like, very clear now the implications with AI, where if we're allowing AI to control networks, AI to control devices, AI to control information, we're allowing it to make management decisions. And I think coming back to that specific tenet of like, we need to be very clear about what AI is allowed to do. And it might be in specific contexts that might change. Military applications might be different with guided missiles versus in an education setting where students shouldn't be allowed to have it write a paper, but they can have it say, hey, could you look at my grammar? And it could provide grammatic input, something like that.
Yeah.
And then I think additionally with regards to cybersecurity, I think unfortunately we're actually very close to what you described of like automated worms being able to self-propagate and leverage AI, or at least AI-based exploit development. Anecdotally, I haven't looked at the data, but of course, I deal with cybersecurity all the time. We've seen a very large increase in like specific high-risk exploits that allow what's called like privilege escalation. Specifically inside of like different operating systems. And we've seen just like an exponential increase, particularly after, AI companies have started releasing these incredibly powerful models, probably within the past like 6 months to a year. And I think it's only going to accelerate. And so what that means is we're going to see a lot of very sophisticated, high quality exploits that are going to come out. And we've already seen some threat actors start to use these against, we call them like maybe like package distribution systems. So like software uses packages, It makes it easier for a developer who doesn't have to write everything from scratch. Joe wrote this 2 years ago. It works great. You know, there might be some security flaws in it. Nobody's really tested it. We don't know, but
Copy
it
and
does
paste.
exactly what I need, pretty much.
And then tweak it a little bit once you get it in, in your ecosystem.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And then they will attack these specific packages, and it will impact 100, 1,000, 10,000, a million different applications that might use those specific pieces of software. And it's very prevalent right now. Like when I say very prevalent, it's probably weekly that these attacks are happening. And, you know, there's sophisticated ways that like we as defenders can address those. And a lot of the companies that manage those packages are working to implement like what we call security controls to kind of address those problems. But all that to say that, like, not to stoke fear or anything, but like it's not that far-fetched. But the flip side of that coin is that like the defending side is getting better, moving faster, creating controls in place to make sure that we're not, you know, as impacted by those or doesn't spread as much. And then going back to basics where ensuring that like people are authorized to do what they need to do. Everything is following security best practices for, you know, maybe that industry or what have you.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely possible. It is. And I think we're moving closer to that with some of these more sophisticated models.
Have you guys seen that Alec Jones video from like 10 or 12 years ago? It's been surfacing recently on the internet. I've seen it probably 4 times in the past, maybe 3 times in the past month. He's on Joe Rogan, which was obviously common, but this is so far back he had hair, right? And so he is doing one of his tyrannical rampages is the best way to explain it. I'll give you a sample. I'm paraphrasing. AI is going to take over the world, and it's like a hive mind, and it's going to inject itself into every system and every computer thing, and it's going to create this database where it's able to hack into everybody's computer, and he just goes on and on and on with this, like, almost now seeming like an eerie prophecy of what has not fully developed, but is on the course of what it looks like is developing. And he says it way more articulately than me, and he has a lot more knowledge in that world. But I was watching this video, and he even goes in talking about how there's this elite. The elites in society are creating this thing that's going to pretty much control the world, or whatever his rant is about. And you look at that video from 10 years ago, and you would say, okay, that's crazy. This is entertainment. And now you look at it now and you're like, this is very, very, very close to reality. It's maybe not quite there yet, but it's not it's not viewed the same as it was then as in Crazy Talk. It's viewed as in he is like really close to hitting it on the head. What are your thoughts on, okay, it's kind of the same thing we've been talking about, but like this hive mind type thing, which for those who maybe aren't familiar with the hive mind, you have the best example is like, think of The Last of Us as a popular video game. It became a very, very successful TV show on HBO Max. And it's a iteration of like a zombie story, right? But these zombie type things, it's a fungal infection that infects people, and they are all connected, right? So like if you have like a zombie walking in the street and it sees like a human that it can attack and eat, or one of these, I forget what they call them in this series, but it can send that message to the rest of the hive, think of like a hive of bees or something, but they're like connected from like with an invisible wire or an invisible telepathy. And it can like pretty much say, hey, I found a victim, and it can send like, thousands of other zombie things to come and attack it. And that's like a crude example, but the point is like this hive mind reality of like, could at one point ChatGPT, Claude, Grok break out of their code months, years from now, whatever, and start to work together in a way that's like, not to sound eerie, but like hive mindish, and like start to attack existing infrastructure that's been set up by humans and attack defense programs, and do this fictitious example in the Tom Cruise movie Mission Impossible Final Reckoning, where you have this world takeover, world domination type scenario. Is that something that is possible? What are your thoughts, Jordan?
You've had a few references on some of your shows about conspiracy and conspiracy theories. I think that when I look at things like that, I try and observe what is probable. So what's the probability of something like that happening? is there infrastructure and knowledge in place to prevent that from happening? So low probability, or is it kind of wild, wild west still? Are we in that era? And I don't know the answer. I'm probably going to pass to you in here just in a second. So, where are we in the span of the creation of AI to the implementation of AI to the what I think a lot of people would consider the daily use of AI? And then what's the probability of it going rogue? And I don't know the answer, but when dealing with situations like that, that's typically how I would try and observe or formulate an opinion.
I would say it's not impossible. I would say it's probably very unlikely that scenario would happen for like a lot of different reasons, between like physical guardrails where, the AIs that are currently being developed and built are managed and run in a lot of different data centers. But like if we absolutely had to, like an extinction level event, systemic, we need to deal with this right now across all AI models, we can go unplug those. Like we have the ability to turn them off. And then I think additionally, like there's the flip side of that coin, right? So we see maybe a rapid coordinated attack from an AI-based system on nuclear systems, on power systems, on water treatment plants, things like that. We disable those access to the internet, right? So it might be likely that like aspects of it might get breached. So like one power plant, a handful of power plants, but thinking about like how rapid it might need to occur in order for AI to effectively take over all the power systems in the United States, all of the nuclear warheads, things like that. And then additionally, all of these systems have, a lot of them at least, have been prepping and wargaming for scenarios like this for a very, very long time. Not to mention the fact that while AI is incredibly sophisticated and it does have a lot of capabilities that are very difficult to find or would be like really expertise level in like exploit development, lateral movement, privilege escalation. So like moving throughout a network, developing exploits that, now I'm just a regular user. I'm not a user anymore. I'm an administrator, so I can run whatever code I want to do and stuff like that. It has a lot of that functionality and capability based on the user. So like a layman coming in might be able to get some good information out of it or some interesting information, but a lot of it is going to be based on the capability of the individual coming in saying, I need to develop exploits for this specific type of system. And so kind of back to that assistive thought, we're not really quite at the place, in my opinion, where we have a rogue AI that has the ability to self-propagate and then based on that self-propagation, take control over like any sort of nuclear warhead or anything like that. And then I think the science fiction behind that often paints a picture of like, we have no way to, stop that. We have no security controls in place. We have no ability to prevent this from happening. And that's pretty systemically not the case. Like even in like other businesses that I've worked for, there's a way that you can deal with that. If it's restoring from a backup, if it's quickly determining how it got in and, blocking that, ensuring that you're following like security best practices in those scenarios, a lot of the times can at least ensure that like as a company or as a piece of critical infrastructure, you have the ability to recover. You have the ability to restore from backups. You have the ability to move all of your customer data or evict whatever bad actor happens to be in your system. Like there's paths forward. Unfortunately, we see a lot of places that, missed one little gap and then we hear about ransomware and stuff like that, where people have to pay the bounty or, to get their data back. Unfortunately, things like that do happen. But I think considering the likelihood of like a systemic rogue AI being able to breach and attack infrastructure large scale, I don't think it's happening. And I think that by the time that AI gets sophisticated enough, we are going to have pretty broad controls in place in order to be able to like either shut it down or cut off access between like that critical infrastructure. And I think we're seeing some of that now with at least the federal government, at least like trying to get involved in AI. So I think it was an executive order that was slated to come out last week that was talking about like review processes for AI models. I didn't know where it landed. I haven't really paid too much attention to it. But I think the idea being that, normally I'm not a huge federal government person that, we should have more, not really. But I think when it comes to sophisticated like technology like AI models, specifically ones that are designed for cybersecurity, I think it is a good idea to have some oversight outside of these businesses. And so with that being said, there is rumblings in the process of like executive orders or bills that are at least coming in the pipeline right now to say like, hey, there needs to be some review process before we release these. We need some security controls in place so that, a kid can't download this and break into Apple and exfiltrate all of your iCloud data or something like that.
Yeah, those are great points. I think you put it on the head earlier, just coming out of the AI deep dive for a moment, is that this is a topic that we're all interested in, but we approach from different backgrounds. And you said it earlier that you can have 3 more different people from the same, that grew up in the same roof. And I think it's representative of society and a lot of families where even though your upbringing is the same, it creates different products based on nature, the nature of the person, right? You were probably always inclined to be someone who had a passion for education and mentoring students and coaching and taking your passion for football and sports broadly and then applying that to your life. And you were always a very systems and security oriented person, and you found that. It took me long. You guys kind of found it right after college. It took me longer, probably just this year in 2026, where I realized, man, I probably am most happy, most alive in creating something. And it may not always be a podcast, but this is where I could do this and it feels like I could do something like this or a metamorph of this indefinitely and not get burnt out. That being said, I wanted to touch on some things that we share in common, some things that we have different. We did grow up in the same house, but we did kind of like flourish into 3 separate, really completely different personalities. Jordan, you had mentioned that history is something that you're really passionate about. I know you teach a lot of different subjects, and you have over the past maybe 10 years, but I have a question for you regarding history. I know you've probably taught a lot, but if you had to pick one person, one empire, one nation, one historical event, I know it's like a lot of different options there, but like one thing from history that's like outside of teaching it as an educator, but like personally for you, it's been something that you've reflected on or learned about and you've enjoyed, what would you say it had to be? Who would it have to be? What organization or whatever country?
Yeah.
1776.
Oh, that's a great question because it is so broad. I find myself going into channels of interest in specific topics. Right now I'm listening to The Splendid and the Vile by Eric Larson on audiobook. It's about the Blitz in England, London during World War II. And a lot of good stuff there. I like going into topics that maybe I got brushed over in broad strokes in school. And then like I find myself later in life finding something that kind of revives my interest in that. Not too long ago, I read a book that was several hundred pages on, listened to it more accurately.
Was that the longest book you've read?
No, it's not. That's a good question. Thanks for asking, Christian. No, it was like a book on Vikings. It was like, 800 pages, and I needed some time to kill while I was on the road. So, Audible, here we go, and gave me about a week's worth of listening material. So I kind of bounce into areas that I really, really like. But if I had to pick one, I really think I like post-World War II, Cold War, up and all the way probably through Reagan, 80s, 90s. I really like looking at Cold War and just how geopolitics changed. Country behavior changed. You have the first emergence of global superpowers that take place. You have this good versus evil struggle with a lot of people resonate with communism and capitalism globally taking on multiple theaters. And also a lot of the things that took place in that not a full century, probably less than 3/4 of a century. We'll call it half a century probably. They have set up a lot of our current events, a lot of things that people are seeing hit their news feed, their social media feeds. Those are impacts that took place during that time period on a global scale. So I just find that period really interesting.
You make a really good point. I take a 20-year-old today who sees on the news Russia's invaded Ukraine, which I know has happened several years ago, but it's been an ongoing war. And that 20-year-old may have no context. And I would say in my 30s now, I could find myself, and people in my age group could find themselves not having a context for that. My wife and I were in New York recently. I picked up a map at one of the gift shops. It was a map of how the world was laid out, the country's territorial areas that they had in 1910, 1920. And I was looking at Russia, the USSR. I don't remember for the USSR at that point, but Russia had this expanded territory into the Ukraine. It was part of their borders. And so you see something like that on just a map in a gift shop. And I actually bought it, and it's on our wall at home. And because I like the style of the map. and it broadened my perspective. It was like, okay, the 20-year-old may not know, or maybe even the 50-year-old may not know in another part of the world, why is Russia attacking Ukraine? But I'm not saying they're right, but in their opinion, a lot of maybe Russians' opinion, or maybe just the top leadership, those were previously our lands, is probably the sentiment. They previously belonged to us and we want to take them back. You could probably speak to this very intelligently. After World War I or II, or a combination of both, the Allied powers would redistribute the lands based on how those wars ended, and Ukraine was given a large percentage of that territory. Again, I don't have an opinion whether that's right or wrong. It's just what happened. And so it helps broaden your perspective as to why Russia is so vigorously fighting for this land. They want to invade Ukraine because in their head, they think that this land belongs to them. It was previously part of their territory. And I'm curious if you have like any thoughts on that. And you can use that specific example or even other examples that may come to mind with the Cold War, with something like that, and where it learning the history helps you understand why things happen. Like you said, it set up the current events, why things are happening in our day and age. Like, what's your take on that?
Yeah, so I'd have to go back and look. I don't want to misrepresent history, but if my memory serves, at the end of World War II, the Allied powers were on top, and the Allied powers included Russia. So I think that Russia had control over the region of Ukraine. And then at the fall of the USSR is when they began to lose a bunch of their territory.
Yeah.
But to go back to your point, yeah, I mean, learning history kind of helps us prevent it, that old cliche. And just understanding how and why things are the way they are now. When there was the conflict in Gaza, I went on real quick and found a little is animated for high school, just explaining not just Israel, Gaza today, but from the establishment of Israel as a state and then the progression of all of that history, not necessarily biblical history, but post-World War II, essentially, so that the kids could kind of, yes, you get all of this information on social media, and we don't want the loudest voice to win for your formulating your young thoughts and opinions. Here's kind of the history of what's taken place here. Now, you make the decision, right? Who's right, who's wrong. And I'm not going to go there, but that's kind of the way I try to lead them in history. When I am teaching history is, here's the information. Now, you could make arguments for both sides, do that on your own time, or maybe there's a specific, class segment dedicated to something that's, some of it is controversial. I was going to say less controversial, but some of it is controversial.
Yeah.
So
absolutely. I think when you talk about land, you talk about territories, you talk about people dying, there's always going to be two sides. And it's like the old adage, like there's side A, side B, and the truth is somewhere in the middle, like where the territory should be lined up, or, where the fighting should stop, or where the negotiations should give this concession to this side and this concession to this side. And that's Israel and Gaza, that's Russia and Ukraine, that's so many different things in life. But I just find it interesting that the point you made, I guess what I'm continuing to think back onto is that by looking at history, because I think there's a lot of people in the world who would say it's pointless, it's boring, they wouldn't adopt the same principle of studying it will help us not repeat it. What's the point? But it will help us understand the conflicts happening today, and it can help us like prevent it from happening again. Ethan, I'm curious your take on that. You can comment on that current, or you can share your favorite historical nation, empire, person, or both. You can do both.
Honestly, I don't have a great historical answer. I used to love history, and since then, it's probably been like 10 years since I've really dug into any form of like meaningful history where I would be able to say like, these are the specific points that this person did or that I remember about their life, that they're the reason why they're my hero in history. I think Winston Churchill's, a really easy pick. I think a few years ago I listened to some of his speeches, and I can't really quote them other than, like, we'll fight them on the beaches, we'll fight them, even now I can't really quote it. But I do remember listening to that, and I was like, just incredible speech. Now, on the comment of like war in general, it did, while y'all were talking, it definitely made me think of the concept of like a just war, which is like the idea that like for any war, is there a specific scenario wherein it's considered just, like that the people who are going to war either in defense of someone else or in defense of their homeland, is it just? And I'm definitely not commenting on, any of the current conflicts that are going on, but just thinking about it where it's like, it's an interesting concept to think about the sacrifice of people that as a leader might report to you or might be a part of your military for what you believe is justice. And the wars that we've mentioned might be just, again, I don't want to pick a side, but just thinking about it, it's a very heavyweight, very difficult position in leadership to say, like, let's take it probably an easy example of World War II. It's so far removed. Everybody wants to fight the Nazis. You're still sacrificing American lives. You are still upending the economy. You're still repurposing all of manufacturing effectively in the United States. And if I remember correctly, bringing it under the control of the federal government during that time. You might be able to correct me, but by and large, it's a huge, massive undertaking for something that is an ocean away because of, in my opinion, and I think the opinion at the time, at least, that they had was that it was a just war, that we're going in to keep Europe from being overrun. We're going in to protect our allies and, of course, what happened in the concentration camps.
There was a lot of backlash from that. I mean, people were still wanting the United States to remain a posture of isolationists.
Yeah.
So there was a very heavy segment of the American public that did not want to get engaged in Europe's conflict.
That's right. Yeah,
and
I
you
forgot.
see the rise of propaganda take place, not only from European countries, but America began to enact its propaganda machine to kind of sway the public opinion of what was just, what was righteous, what was the right thing to do at the time, which was every point that you just made. So there's a lot of interesting points that go into why we go to war. There's a quote, "We've been fighting just and unjust war since the dawn of time." And that's an accurate statement.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, absolutely.
You both of those things you shared, it just reminded me of this, something I shared about a month or two ago with a guest. I was talking about the Crusades, and I had said, and I'll say what I said on one conversation, and then I'll say what someone shared with me on a second conversation. I said the Crusades were, at that point in time, I viewed them as probably an unnecessary act by Christendom Europe, because the probably broad stroke narrative that most people who don't go in the weeds would look at is Christian knights from Europe are invading the Middle East to bring Christianity, to redeem the Middle East, to maybe fight for the Israelites or the Hebrews, however they were interpreted in the, whenever that was, 1100s, 1200s, 1400s. And just a few weeks later, I was having a conversation with a guest, and they said, Muslims were killing, murdering, and raping people all over the Middle East. And it wasn't this Christianity is trying to conquer with violence. It was this viewpoint of Christian knights from Christendom Europe are going to protect and defend the weak. And so just that dichotomy, I found myself in this position where I had believed, like a lot of people, I just had this broad stroke of what happened. You see Christians going and taking war to the Middle East. And I thought, okay, that's probably not a good representation of Christianity historically. But then I get this other perspective, maybe more detail on the matter. And now I'm presented with another side of the story. And I probably should have gone and done my own research after he told me that, because I just hadn't made it a priority. But I think that story of me thinking one thing and then being informed of maybe some more information I didn't have is representative of so many things in history. There is always that 1% chance of how much of our history is true. History is written by the victor. We would look at Germany, Nazi Germany, sending planes to bomb London as them attacking. But is there something that was buried in history? This is a question, not I think Nazi Germany was correct. I think Hitler was a good guy. None of that is what I'm saying. But is there a possibility that there is some stuff that was buried in history because Germany had no opportunity to contribute to the broad historical narrative and how it's recounted for generations to come? The same way I thought those knights invading the Middle East was bad. Is there, and I just use the German Blitzkrieg as an example, but there are other examples throughout history. Japan attacking Pearl Harbor, horrible event. Thousands of Americans died. But is there something buried in history there that was covered up potentially? You know, that it just caused you to wonder. I'm not saying that the Blitzkrieg was a good act or the bombing of Pearl Harbor was a good act. Those are both atrocious. But it just has caused me to think, having conversations like this, is the point I'm making, has caused me to think, like, when it comes to history, the past 100 years, the U.S. has written a lot of it. And the West, right? Great Britain, Canada. I guess it's best summed in this way. How much is lost to history because the losing side didn't get a chance to voice true, not untrue, true things that happened that caused a response or caused them to do a certain thing. Because it's never just like one person is all good and one person is all bad. But that stuff doesn't get broadcasted. It gets covered up. Maybe there was good, maybe 1% or 0.1% good that Japan had done at some point and that was lost to history, or Germany had done and that was lost to history because it was written by the victors. I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that, as just looking at the topic broadly of history is written by the victors. Like, what are your thoughts on what could have been lost to history, both recently in the past 100 years, but even across the past thousands of years?
Can I go first and you give a way better answer?
I would like that.
Yeah.
I don't know if it'll be way better.
I don't know. My thoughts on that are, I think you're probably right. I think that when we look at scenarios like Japan, or we look at scenarios like Germany, World War II, it's incredibly difficult for me to mentally legitimize those type of events because of what we saw Japan do in China. I think it's like the rape of Nanking. I might be misremembering the name, but where they're effectively coming in and slaughtering and doing horrible, genetic testing and like testing diseases on Chinese citizens, like awful things. And I think additionally with Pearl Harbor, if I remember correctly, it was as a response to the United States embargoing Japan and I think refusing to sell oil. And then they started to move into the Philippines. And as a byproduct of that, Japan was like, well, the U.S. isn't going to come attack us. We're going to go bomb them and to show them our displeasure. I think, if I'm remembering correctly, effectively thinking that it was like this was this minor thing. And the United States was like, we are not having that, which of course launched us into World War II. I think you're probably right. I think, though, when we think about like the Nazi regime, or when we think about Japan and its like imperialist motives trying to expand throughout Asia, and the horrible things that those places did, it's difficult to legitimize any side. And I think that there's probably very, very little legitimacy in the fact of like, we were not told the whole truth. There probably is some, right? Like I think it was Dresden that was firebombed by the RAF, which was a very big deal at the time. If I'm remembering correctly, I'm sure you'll correct me in a minute. Where it was kind of launched World War II into this concept of total war, which is the idea that by killing a civilian that helped enable the Nazi or the UK government to effectively be able to continue to mobilize, continue to get food or whatever else,
paying
weapons to the
taxes,
troops, paying taxes,
building
that you're
infrastructure,
effectively undermining that government. And total war was kind of this idea that like, well, if we just bomb it and we get rid of everybody, they can't sustain it. Mm-hmm. And it was a tactic that was used, I believe, on both sides, much to the blowback from the international community for the Allies, I think, at the time. So I think that's probably an example of like, we don't really talk about that. And it was something that I didn't learn about until I watched a documentary a few years ago where it was like, yeah, we firebombed them. That being said, it's not really something that, I don't think that there's a lot of scenarios outside of that where we're probably not told the whole truth, at least in that specific context of World War II. Other wars, there probably is. There's probably a lot that we don't know.
We'll take the napalm bombing in, was it Vietnam? Yeah, I don't want to get that incorrect.
Yeah.
That is like, at the time, somehow justified. But looking at it historically, that caused, there's different camps, but I would say it was on the border or across the border of this is inhumane way to conduct warfare. To get even more nuanced, and you can comment on this as well, World War I, I believe it was Germany, it might have been another country, they were protesting the use of shotguns in trenches. It was a relatively new invention of the rifle or the gun, a variation of the gun, and the wounds were so atrocious and it was interpreted as inhumane to use a shotgun. That's I guess more of like a zero down narrow example, but it's the same concept of like using napalm or firebombing these cities where there are things being done that on this side of history, upon reflection, it seems they could be interpreted as inhumane or not the most fair way to conduct combat. I'm curious on your thoughts, maybe on what I shared about also the original question of history being written by the victor.
I'm going to touch on what you just said. The regulation of warfare is relatively new. So from everywhere or everything to, you're referencing the shotguns in World War II and trench warfare, or World War I, World War II trench warfare?
I think so, yeah.
So there's also a similar occurrence in American warfare history where they would equip triangular bayonets to muskets, and a triangular wound is nearly impossible to stitch. And it was, after the advancing lines got into hand-to-hand combat, getting stuck with a triangular bayonet wound was just absolutely devastating.
In the Civil War?
I don't know if it was Civil War. I know that it was early American conflicts. And so there was essentially a gentleman's agreement that we're going to do away with this style of weapon because it's not, well, it's almost too violent for war, which sounds crazy to say, right? So you have these stigmas historically on things that are just not, I guess, I don't know the right way to phrase it. I don't want to say gentlemanly, because war is not gentlemanly, but there has been eras of warfare conducted under the precedence of, or war being presided over by gentlemen, I guess, if you want to go that route with it. As far as it being written by the victor, and you brought up the question of what percentage of good was done by X party, I would say that it would benefit anyone to look at the weight of historical evidence and say, at what point does this small iota of good outweigh the years of bad, evil, wrong, unjustness, persecution, what have you, whether it be the Crusades or a European conflict. At what point does that small good need to be brought to the forefront? And in some cases there is. If we're going to go, to World War European conflicts, you can look at someone like Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who, smuggled people out of Nazi-controlled territory in Europe. Mom's got a book on her shelf about him. It's a really good read. Yeah, I think it's just you've got to look at it through the lens that I think interests you, for sure, and you've got to then make decisions based on what is provided in it. And some of that stuff is hard digging. Some of that stuff you really have to find. We talk to kids about getting primary sources, secondary sources. Where are you getting your information? What's the quality of the information that you're getting? Is it someone who claims to be an expert, or is it someone who is there and can actually recount the information of what took place? So I think that when you're looking at history through a historical lens, it benefits the consumer of the content to look in the right places.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I would definitely agree with that. Yeah. Because I think particularly the point that you said about like, if a horrible regime does a meager amount of good, does it validate the regime? Where like broad strokes, we might have been communicated all of the terrible things they did. Okay, maybe 1% of what they did was good, right? 1%. Is it worth talking about? And they've killed millions and millions and millions of people. Probably not, I think. And I think broad strokes, the history that we've been given, well, I would say probably not complete. Like, I think we can all agree to that, whether we're talking about World War II or, whatever else. There's just only so many accounts that we can get from any given event. And then, of course, the veracity of those accounts, or people retelling it, or it being rewritten and things like that. But yeah, I completely agree that when we think about the good that any regime or government or group of people did, it can often be outweighed by the terrible things that they did and their impact on the world.
Yeah. I guess just to pivot slightly, what I'm thinking about in the art history, and not all that was lost, but like art history and music of people not involved in the government of Nazi Germany, but they live there. They have no say over when they were born. The 31-year-old musician has no say over when they're born. and where they're born and the parents they're born to, but they live in Nazi Germany and they're German citizens. And now they are contributing one iota of good to the world through something they create, or a government, or not a government, sorry, like a business venture, an invention, something creative that, you know, helps move the needle outside of war, outside of global domination of Nazi. They live in Germany, but they have nothing to do with that conflict.
Yeah.
How much of that was lost? Not how much of the Nazi government, using that as an example, was lost, that they did good, but how much of, because now the whole world maybe is viewing, at the end of the war, 1944, they're viewing Germany as a large amount of people are viewing them as scum. You know, these people are, but it's like not everybody in Nazi Germany was scum.
Yeah.
Not everybody in the U.S. was bombing napalm on Vietnam. Not everybody in Mongolia was raiding and killing and raping people in China. Like you take any historical event and a historical leader and historical regime, and there is good in the society in which the governed live.
Yeah.
And how much of that is lost because of the suppression of that society or that culture?
I think an infinite amount, like in the sense that like it's inquantifiable for us to be able to say that on an individual level, someone who lived under a difficult regime where they had a minimal or small ability to be able to communicate their art or their written word or whatever else they wanted to say or whatever business they wanted to start, and they were unable to do so either because of violence or because of the regime conscripting, you know, we have no way of quantifying that. I think an interesting kind of tangent point, or maybe parallel point even, a book that definitely reframed my perspective on the First World War is All Quiet on the Western Front. It's probably, I don't think I cried. I think I almost cried.
Is it related to the movie at all? I saw the movie.
I've never seen the movie. I can't speak to the movie.
I got emotional during the movie.
The book was heartbreaking. It describes effectively what you're talking about. This young German boy, I think he's like 17, is conscripted with his friends, and it's his recounting his tale through the trenches in World War I.
And it is similar to the movie then.
Heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And it definitely paints the picture, I think, of what you're trying to describe. Not the regime, not the Japanese government, not the Mongol, you know, whoever was leading those hordes to attack China. But instead, we're seeing it through the perspective of the individual. Mm-hmm. And this person who was conscripted and forced to go to the front and fight and watch everyone around them die. And they're I think the only person who returns back to their little German village at the end of the war. Mm-hmm. And I think that experience is probably pretty similar across ages and across, when I mean like ages, I mean like being conscripted as a peasant to go fight because your lord is calling you up, being conscripted in World War II, being in the UK, the United States, on and on and on, is probably very similar. But I think, that doesn't extend to the horrible government and, oppressive leadership that forced these people into it and took away their ability to create art, to create business, to create value, to create meaning, rather than forcing them to go fight and die.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on what could have been lost from the individual level or the smaller scale, non-governmental level of these societies?
Well, earlier we referenced propaganda, so I think it's the volume in which things are shared. The individual, the human experience, unless it's magnified, is not going to have the volume presence that a government or a controlling entity or body has to get their message across. So while present, it's just not as, we'll say, prevalent. Not that there's any maybe less value in that. It's just that it's not as widely distributed or magnified, or however you want to articulate that. So I think it's probably present, but it's less maybe accessible. Maybe instead of mass publication, it's a diary entry that someone overlooked and didn't want to include in their thesis.
Yeah, I mean, I think to summarize, we definitely don't support any of these like regimes who were killing innocent people throughout history. Nazi Germany, Mongolia, whoever. I guess the question that I just will think about after this conversation is, what individual's piece of art or contribution to inventions could have been lost in these societies because they were born into these that governments and countries where they had no choice of where they would, be born into and where they would live. And they were kind of almost oppressed in the same sense that the other countries that these places were invading were oppressed. It just bears to question like the possibility there of what could have been. Something I was thinking about as we were talking about that is the intersection of art and history and how that's changed over time. I mean, just to hit it with a broad brushstroke, you have art through Renaissance paintings, right? And that being a part of historical context. And you have art through music and that developing through multiple periods and multiple iterations. And you have people that come to mind like Beethoven and Mozart, who were both German, by the way. Funny coincidence there. And then you move into the 1900s and you enter in really the late 1900s, 20th century, and into the 21st century. And then you enter this new art form, video games. It is in many ways different than a Renaissance painting, but in many ways the same. You have someone who has taken something that they had a vision of in their head and they created it in a medium format. Same as like composing not same, but similar in composing like a score for a movie or like a score for one of Beethoven or Mozart's works. It causes you to think about how the intersection of art and history over time have just overlapped like a spiral helix, kind of like a DNA strand. Going back to what we said earlier about all growing up in the same house, at one point we were all had an affinity for video games. It was maybe at different varying levels. The game that I think encapsulates this the most, that we all played and we all loved, was Rome Total War. This is a game loosely based on historical events of the Roman Empire and the different houses that existed. And some of it is probably fictitious as well, but there's a real component of like, you're picking this house, the Julius house or the Scorpius house, and you are this family underneath the Roman Empire, the SPQR, and you're being given orders by the Senate and by maybe the Caesar or the Kaiser of Rome to go and invade these countries and then nearby and kind of expand Roman influence into the broader Mediterranean area, into Northern Africa, into the Middle East. And you're of course playing this game and you're following along this journey, but it was such an immersive way to participate in something that was historical, semi-historically accurate, in a way that looking at a painting, listening to a composition, it wasn't quite as immersive. And I would even say, even watching a movie, it wasn't quite as immersive. I'm curious for you guys. I have more thoughts, but I want to hear from you. What was something about Rome Total War, specifically Rome Total War 2, a game we all loved and played together on our home computer that was like this wide this way and this wide this way, computer monitors you don't see anymore. What was it about that game that like you guys enjoyed, that it felt like just immersive for you?
Felt like a virtual board game because you could kind of go turn by turn basis depending on the faction that you picked. And you had a lot of different areas that you had to, we'll call it govern. You had, I think it was social order was one. You didn't want your people to revolt. Yep. You had to build up your army and your economy simultaneously, I think.
Yep.
So it was just something that we could do where, rather than sitting at a long table, pulling out a board game and, playing it that way, that's the way I felt. It was just kind of like a very long board game, just turn-based and be able to, go to war with each other, create alliances, all those things.
Yeah. I really liked it because I felt like the mechanics were obviously like a compressed version of like how you would manage a city. And like as a kid, it was like, oh, like this feels like I'm really managing like a Roman Empire. Like I have to manage the money. I have to manage my troop conscription. I have to make sure that I have enough people in my cities to make sure that my cities grow so that I can build new like bathhouses and like temples. Yeah. So that I get specific like buffs for that. So like I'll get better armor, weapons, or better like social score. I don't remember exactly what it's called, but it's like if you build specific temples, it'll like make sure that the people like it more and
you can tax them more and get more money out of them.
Like there's so much other different stuff. But it was also, as a kid, it was relatively simple mechanics. Like you have a lever for like bringing in more money, but that makes the people more upset. And then you can also like recruit more people, which is going to be based on how many people that you have inside of your city, and then of course the buildings that you're able to build for like your cavalry or for your archers, and then for your catapults, and then certain factions you can get elephants. And so there felt like at a simple level a very easy way to understand how to manage like a growing Roman Empire. And so it felt like as a kid, especially, you're there, like you're managing it, you're taking over these cities, you're fighting Carthage. This is amazing. I'm leading Rome. I'm going to take it over.
Yeah.
And then
You were immersed.
You were immersed. You were
Yeah.
immersed. Yeah. And it's still fun as an adult. I definitely have like tried to get more into the specific mechanics of the game a little bit, where like if you build up your farms, it'll actually like quietly increase your tax income and increase your population, so more people will show up, and then you can build better buildings, and then you can like train specific units and then move them to another city and then disband them, and like it forces the population growth, so then you can like artificially inflate the population of that city and then create new build, and like there's lots of different advantages that you can kind of find after playing for a while. And it's actually on the phone. I really like to play it there. Yeah.
Everything you said I resonate with. We played it as kids, right? It came out in maybe early 2000s, and we played it on this huge clunky TV, but it's one of those games that's like stood the test of time, where it has replayability, it has a user base, and so they adopted it to phone. I have it on the iPad. I haven't played it in a couple of years, but about a year or two ago, I went through a campaign, and everything you're saying, you can. I mean, I did exactly what you're saying, where like this city is starting to shrivel up and die. There's no population, so this one that's booming and has all the buildings that make people want to go there. You just build a infantry unit of 250 men. You do that 4 times, and then you send that over, and then you've added 1,000 people. And so there is this level of immersion and then replayability that comes with it. But also, as an adult, you're experiencing it through a more mature lens than as a kid.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember. I have a distinct memory as a kid of like, for those who are unfamiliar with the game, like you said, you have this army, you simulate these battles, and then once you conquer a city, it becomes part of your territory, and then your goal is to take over. The base game is built to take over 50 cities and then conquer Rome. You kind of revolt against the Senate that's been giving you these orders the whole time, and take over the capital essentially. And I remember as a kid, like you would scroll through your cities on your turn and see, okay, why is this one in the red? Why are they revolting? And I just didn't understand the mechanics as a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old or an 11-year-old. Why is everything falling apart? You don't know. But then as you get older and you're replaying it a second time, you are understanding it's more mature concepts of, I can't just raise taxes to the highest level because I need more money. I have to also factor in this, the sentiment of the people. And so in a lot of ways, consciously, subconsciously, it's training you on life principles. You can't just like demand everything. You have to also balance. Take parenting, for instance. Like, it is a very crude but workable analogy to parenting. You cannot just demand and be demonstrative and controlling and raise the taxes on your child without any give. You can't constantly make them clean their room and force these rigid structures, but never take them to the park, but never celebrate their birthday, but never give them a gift at Christmas. There has to be a combination. And so, again, it is a crude example, but when you're looking at the comparison of something that you would do in real life, interacting with other humans, and then like running these little cities, and balancing the sentiment of the population, and in this city they're burning down the buildings once they've had it up to here with too much taxes or not being provided an adequate bathhouse to bathe in. Like, it's fictitious, it's fake, but it's representing something real. Like, think about teenagers when they rebel. If you would live in a house and all you have is strict rules and there's no celebration and no joy for that child, they might rebel and go off the deep end in their teenagers once they start to get more and more autonomous. And so there is a dim thread, a dim reflection, and like a small thread of connection there between, really, which is a broader principle of how something that you see in a game can relate to real life and can inform you on how you can really learn how to deal with other people. And apart from that, it was just a really interesting and really fun game to play. Apart from all the life lesson stuff, I really enjoyed the combat. Like, a lot of video games, you are like controlling a character, right? And you're fighting with a sword or you're shooting a gun. But in this game, you are like this third person invisible general over this army. And you are telling these troops to go this way and these horses to go that way and these catapults to aim at this part of the building. And you are learning strategy. right? There's some carryover for that in real life as well. How do I attack this city in a way that I can win it over and make it my own? There's so many applications to that in life, and applying strategy instead of just, you can't just run all your foot soldiers right into the gate. Like, they're all going to get arrow shot at them or pour boiling hot oil on them and they're just going to die. You have to think about things strategically, and you can't just rush into certain things in life. It takes pragmatic approach. It takes slowing down and thinking about it. I'm curious if any takeaways similar to that, Jordan, did you have when playing the game? If there was something that stood out to you and how you apply it to real life in that game.
I can definitely see the perspective on strategy. All of the different components that you're working through to try and be successful in the game, whether it be the specific battle or it be the long-term conquest of territory. And I enjoyed the game because, I mean, we got to play it together. You could play it solo, and it also had the history component. So, you know, there was a lot to enjoy about being able to play with you guys and then have the history-based platform of the game.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I feel like there was a lot from that game, particularly about like managing finances, managing strategy, maintaining a goal over the long term, because beating that game took a long time. I don't think I even beat it as a kid. I think I probably got kind of close, but I would get to like around Egypt area.
And then all your cities would start to burn.
Yeah.
Because you don't know how to manage, the people.
You're not doing taxes right.
Yeah.
You're not building temples. You're not doing any of that stuff. Yeah. But I think as an adult is probably when I finally like completed the game. But yeah, I think there's definitely some things to pull out of there. I think one game that I probably really resonated with that I still play and I probably still think about a lot is probably RuneScape, where everything inside of that game is effectively a function of time. And that by using your time, there's very little areas for you to be able to like accelerate it or be able to like cheat. There's not really a way for you to get to the top. You know, you have to actually put in the time. In order to get to the 99, it's still 1,000 hours for one skill. It's definitely a game that I resonate with.
Break it down, like, for those who never played RuneScape. I know you and I played it a little bit. Jordan played it for about 10 minutes as a kid. What does getting to 99 and any skill mean? What does that look like in this game? What is this game about, RuneScape?
Yeah, so RuneScape is effectively like a MMORPG where you can play as an individual or you can play with a team of people.
Massive multiplayer online role-playing game.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. And so through that, you have the ability to pursue specific skills. And there are also other things that you can do to fill your time, which is like questing. I think there's approximately 300 now. And then specifically what I would play is like the old school version because it reminds me of my childhood. But what I really mean is that when we consider the approach to being excellent at something, any given skill in real life, it is also a function of time. So that in order for you to be considered exceptional at something, it's effectively thousands, tens of thousands of hours. And I think that RuneScape models this very well, probably better than any other game that I've played, specifically by the way that their leveling functions. You know, you can get started and it's really quick. You get, you know, like that dopamine hit, that enjoyment of playing the game where now you're leveling up every 10 minutes. Now that it's every 30 minutes. And then suddenly for you to be considered good at something, it's now multiple hours of actual work in order to get to the next level. And then days in order to finally get to that 99. And then maybe to be considered the top 1% or top 0.1% for a given skill. It's 200 million experience, which is tens of thousands of hours for any given skill, depending on like how you optimize your time. And so I think specifically related to that game, that's one that like I think about a lot, where it's like everything that I do for the level of excellence that I want to see is effectively a function of the utilization of my time. So if I utilize it with a high level of like optimization, I'm doing the absolute best that I possibly can at learning this thing or reading this book or doing what I want to do or whatever it might be, whatever skill I want to improve on, is very similar to RuneScape in that way, where you can, you know, go mine and, you know, kind of slow down, which is a skill in the game.
Yeah, mining ores, right?
Yeah,
different
mining ores.
and they get
sell
harder and
them.
harder.
Yeah, exactly. Or you can do mini games, or you can find other optimal ways in order to utilize your time, which I think is very similar to something like a simple example might be math, where like back to the point of like leveling up, where, you know, maybe high school or like grade school math is like, you know, it's introductory, like you're decent at math, but suddenly, you know, moving beyond being decent, moving beyond being the median, now you're in college and you're studying college math. where you're kind of leveling up in that sense. And it's a function of your time. In order to be able to effectively pass those tests, you have to study. In order to study, it means reading books, reading papers. And then by doing those things, you're leveling up continually until you're reaching this, top 1%, which might be PhD, publishing papers. And again, a function of your time. And then the quality that you produce during that time is based on how you want to optimize it. So I think about that a lot, specifically because I love the game. I think about it in the context of the game, but in the context of my life. Am I being optimized? Am I optimizing my time and using it effectively?
Yeah, I have a point of relation to that in that I played RuneScape as well, right? And so you are working on these skills and doing the same repetitive task over and over and over again to level your character up. And maybe over time you get a little faster at the act. Like you can, if you're mining, you're swinging this pickaxe at a thing of ore. And when you're level 1 or level 10, it harvests the ore slower. And then as you get more and more leveled up, it harvests it faster.
Yeah.
For about a year or two of my life, I was a woodworker. And the person who managed the shop, his name was Gordon, and he was a master craftsman. He taught me everything I know. And I would look, and he taught me how to build these wooden tabletops, barn doors, benches. And I looked at the craftsmanship that he applied to his work, and he had 20 years and did cabinet making and did other furniture projects and had been in the industry for so long. And he had this expertise. He had those hours of mining. And I was brand new. I was the level 1 character or level 1 person. And when I would build the same thing he would build, it was not as good. It took me longer. I made more errors. The final product was not as symmetrical, smooth, perfect. But when I would watch him build the same thing, it would take him less time. He knew the shortcuts, not to shortcut on the work, but fast pass lanes to get to a better solution than I could do going the long way. But because of his years of experience, he knew these ways in which he could get to that final product quicker and create a better product at the same time. As you were sharing, I'm just thinking about that example of how, there's a sentiment among the world, right, where people would say video games are brain rot, you're wasting your life, it's pointless. But there are games that are like that. Maybe Fortnite might be a little bit like that, or games that don't have any depth to them. But there is something that can be extracted from a lot of video games that you can apply to your real life, that you can compare to your real life. And now, 10 years later, after working that woodworking job, I look at the type of craftsmanship that Gordon would make. And he would teach me, and he could teach me as much as he could. And he could sit over my shoulder for the entirety of the project and show me. But even when he would walk away, and a week later, I would remember some of the things he shared me, but I wouldn't have that knowledge, that intuition that comes from countless hours of perfecting the craft. And it's similar in that video game, a video game like RuneScape, where you are grinding and performing a repetitive task. And you made a good example with mathematics, but it's with woodworking. It's with, coaching. You had mentioned earlier about how there's something that you are constantly seeing in your players when you're coaching, this reality of a false step where they're second guessing themselves subconsciously or consciously. And I'll give you a chance to talk about that more and how you've seen it and how you approach coaching that. But the novice, the 11th grader, the 10th grader doesn't know they're doing it, doesn't realize it's a problem, doesn't realize it causes a setback. But you, having countless hours playing high school football, playing college football, coaching for almost or over 10 years now, you see it and you know how to fix it. Tell me more about that false step and maybe some other things that you have applied from having done this craft for so many years that you try to impart into someone who is that level 1 character, that level 1 in the beginning, or not as far along in their journey or their experience or their exposure to the best practices or the best way of doing the XYZ action on the field.
Sure. So true beginner. What you referenced is the false step. So just for listeners that maybe don't observe the technicality of sports as much as maybe some coaches, or I like to think that I do. There's a movement called a false step. So if a player's in a stance and they have an initial movement in a direction they want to go, doesn't matter if it's linebacker, DB, offensive lineman, running back, a lot of people naturally, if they want to go a direction, will take an unconscious step backwards before they go forwards. And it's almost like they're having to propel themselves to go rather than being in the stance that they're being coached to be in and then go in that direction. So I coach offensive line primarily. I have coached other positions, but let's just say there. So if I'm getting them in a stance that's unfamiliar, and I don't want to get too technical, but if you're on the right side, your left leg would be your post leg. If you're on the left side, your right leg would be your post leg. So for a lot of people, that might feel weird if I have a predisposition to be left leg front and I'm comfortable moving in a variety of different directions with that leg in front. If I move you to the left and I put your right leg in front, well, all of a sudden your weight is now different because that's not how you would naturally stand. And so we'll go through drills and I'll see if one, maybe it's like a fluke. And then after 2 or 3 times, I'll go, hey, you're making a false step here. Okay. You need to think about this first step because when you step backwards first, you're giving your opponent time to get into your space, to control you with speed off the ball, with violence of hands, with getting to their position before your position. So there's a lot to be said about that first step that you're taking. And we've got to fix that first step before anything else that's a part of this equation really matters, or you're always going to be fighting from a deficit. So now I'm thinking, all right, if I want to go left and I'm on the right side of the ball, so my left leg's up, and majority of my weight's going to be on my left leg, well, I don't want to think about lifting my left leg. Because when I think about lifting my left leg, I'm thinking about my weight going this way, and now I'm stepping under myself to catch, and now I'm having to step and cross over. And there's some techniques that require that. But if I want to go left as fast as I can, I actually want to push off my right leg to make my left leg move. And that's going to be the faster movement. It's going to be the more accurate movement depending on the technique that I'm teaching to get the player to the designated target, which is what I would call on the defensive lineman. So, original question was?
How have you seen that level 99, maybe you're not the level 99, maybe you're just like level 60, and then you have a level 7 football player, high school student.
Yeah.
How do you impart that wisdom and try and guide them to get them to that next level?
Yeah.
Taking that analogy from a video game into coaching. And I think you answered it pretty well. Like, you have to bring to their awareness the things they're doing, because as a personal point of relation, I'll watch it. Sometimes I'll play pickleball, and there'll be someone in our group of 4 who will want to film it because they have a YouTube channel, an Instagram account or something. And I'll see footage of me, and I'm like, my body moves like that. Like, I look so clunky in my head. In the moment, I feel like I'm one of the top pros. I know I'm not, but I feel like I move in the same way. Like, but then I look at myself and I just look like a blob out there. Like, not, my balance is off. I'm not I haven't developed that perfect balance. I see myself coming off balance a lot. And so there is something to be said about having done it for thousands of hours and then trying to, from the coaching standpoint, try to impart that, because it's similar to teaching, right? You're teaching student history, but in coaching, you're dealing with not just the mind, but the body as well. And you're trying to bridge those two things together, because we all have a way that we view ourselves when we're doing a certain act. You were a rock climber, and we view ourselves a certain way in our head, but then when you have someone from the outside looking in, they can bridge that connection of, hey, this is what you think you're doing, but this is what maybe you're actually doing. And if you make this little small improvement or this adjustment, it'll help you reach that next level. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you answered that really well.
I think we talked earlier too. It was about the volume time for you, the volume of reps or experience. And then I think the point that I was trying to make was accuracy, right? So I can take all of these steps the wrong way, and it hasn't necessarily made me any better at getting to the target that I'm trying to get to, versus, hey, take this coaching, this correction real quick, adjust your first step, think about your momentum in this way, and now every rep I'm getting after the point I've made the decision to change that specific point of technique, they're now better than just the kind of random experience 1,000 reps.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. I guess circling back to video games, what is, if you had to say one video game is the most, word it this way. I know you don't game as much as Ethan and I do now in our adult life, but if you're on your deathbed and you got 1 hour to play a video game, what game would you play and why?
I'm going to let you go first.
Let me go first. I don't know, probably Halo 3. I think that's one that, for me, as like a preteen teenager, and then even now sometimes with friends, is like one that's just feels very fun just jumping back into. And it feels, of course, there's like the element of nostalgia, but then also being able to play with even some of those friends that I played with during that time where it's like, oh, it just almost feels like we're back in the same lobby.
We're
like
back,
10
baby.
years ago. Yeah.
We're
Or
back.
more than 10 years ago. It was
Yeah.
like 2008 that
Yeah.
game came out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, long time ago. But yeah, it's probably that. And I think I have vivid memories of, I think before we even had Xbox Live set up, just going through the campaign just over and over and over again. So that would probably be what it would be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Halo 3 is also my game of choice. There are several that are in the running. Spyro is one. I have strong memories of playing Spyro. Maybe that's why I love Dragon so much.
Could be. Gladiator Road to Freedom.
Gladiator Road to Freedom on the PlayStation
Remember
2.
that one? That was a good one.
That's an immersive game. You feel like it's fictitious, right? But you are playing the part of someone who was sold into slavery or captured in a battle or something, and now you are trying to fight for your freedom.
Yeah.
It's relatively historically accurate in that someone bought you to be a soldier for them, and you are trying to fight and earn money for your owner or your lord or whatever the title is, so that you can earn your freedom out of captivity. And that was a good one.
Yeah.
I probably wouldn't play a video game with my last hour.
You have to.
You have to.
You're required.
You're required.
Required by whom?
Digital poker. Is that what you're going to say?
Nope.
I know you want to say RuneScape.
No, I don't know anything. I remember very little about that other than you guys playing it a ton.
I remember you showed it to me. I used to play on your account.
Really?
Sir
Yeah.
Boatright.
I don't remember that.
You made it.
Did I really?
Yep.
Ethan and I would race home from the bus it would have been 8th grade and 6th grade, or probably because that's when we rode the bus together. And we couldn't play video games Monday through Thursday, so it was Fridays. We would race home from the bus to see who can get to the. We had one computer in the house. Who can get to the computer first to get that first hour on the game?
Mm-hmm. I know we weren't allowed to play Monday through Thursday, but there was definitely some deal working to play Monday through Thursday.
I remember one time, Mom was trying to get you to do something, and I guess I was reading, and I came out of my room, and you were playing PlayStation, and I'm like, "Why? It's like Tuesday. Why is he allowed to play?" And she was just like, "Oh yeah, he just did what I needed him to, and I'm letting him play for a couple hours." And I was like, "What? Can I play?" She was like, "Well, no, I don't think so." Like something like that, and I was so upset. I was so mad, and you're just like smiling over there playing PlayStation or something. I vividly remember that. Yeah, I was devastated. I wanted to play too.
Yeah. We're not going to move on until you tell us your game.
I don't have one.
You have one.
I don't have one.
We're not saying it's the only thing you do in your final hour, but like out of 5 hours of final, one of those 5 hours you have to spend an hour playing games. You can talk to your wife and your kids and have a meal and all this stuff too. Read a book. You know how to read, right? Yeah, you know how to read. You're a teacher.
The AI does it for him.
But like, what game and would you play during that time?
I wouldn't play a game. I'd play with my kids.
You're redeeming yourself from that,
Whatever
from the
they
intro.
wanted to do. Trying to, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What if they wanted to play a game with you?
Then it'd be whatever game they wanted to play.
What game would your kids want to play?
I have no idea.
That you just unredeemed yourself.
I have no idea. We don't play video games a ton in our house.
Board games, card games.
Finley likes dominoes.
Yeah.
Grandma got her on dominoes.
Yeah.
So
That's a good one.
we'll probably play dominoes.
Yeah. You've touched on something that is, I think, a component to why Ethan and I still do play video games. I have friends who play like solo campaign games, but I don't prefer those. I like games where I'm playing with someone else. We do play Halo 3. Ethan and I do play Halo 3 from time to time together, and other games where we are able to interact together and the game is just a common interest. Similar to someone who enjoys poker. You play poker with your buddies. The poker is just the thing you enjoy together, but the real reason, the real value that you get is the time with the friends in the room or in the sphere. And I still enjoy the solo game from time to time. Rome Total War is mostly a solo game, and there are games that are enjoyable. But I think that at least I think for you and I, a large part of it is that connection you get with people that matter to you, and you share that common interest with them.
So where you guys have these memories of us playing video games, I have memories of trying to get you guys to go outside and play.
We played outside.
You did. You did, but oftentimes it was quite the process to try and get you guys engaged in like something
Joining you.
organized. Like, let's
Yeah.
go play gotcha on the basketball goal, or let's play 2-on-1, or
Yeah.
let's go throw the lacrosse ball up against the side of the garage roof.
Oh, we did
yeah.
wall ball a lot.
We
did
did
do
play.
There
wall
was
ball
a
a lot,
a fair amount of outside play. Mm-hmm. I remember throwing that ball up against that. We had a house, right, and then we had a separate garage that had its own roof that was way steeper than a normal roof. It was like almost vertical, and so we would throw that ball and play, wall ball or whatever.
You had to run through the bush there right at the front to tag the wall so you wouldn't get.
Yeah.
What was we played a lot of little league sports growing up. I mean, mom and dad never told us no. If we wanted to try something, I mean, there's swim ribbons, there's wrestling medals. I mean, 2 of us did club lacrosse, football, obviously, basketball, baseball. What was your favorite little league sport as a kid? Or even into high school?
I can go first.
Okay.
I didn't like them at all.
I love how you backfire. You reverse the I'm not choosing a game on him. I like that. Yeah.
Oh, no. I mean, I think there are definitely huge foundational memories in pretty much all of them. I always felt like I didn't want to play, probably because I felt like I wasn't very good. And then by the time that I was like a teenager or preteen, I was kind of like in that rebellious, like, I just don't want to play. I don't care about this.
Dad went on record saying that you were the best wrestler in the family.
He has said that, and I did try it in high school, and I broke my wrist pretty quickly. So we went outside to do a drill. They strapped us to a concrete pillar, and they put like a football.
You were strapped
pad.
to a pillar?
We were strapped with a rubber band to like one of the big concrete pillars out by the practice field. And they were like, "This is agility training. You need to run forward."
Oh, you
tag
weren't
the mat."
taped to it like you're gonna get tomatoes thrown at you in medieval Europe. You're like you have a workout band,
rubber band.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
You're strapped with
You're
like
doing
a
an
rubber
agility
band to your
drill.
chest.
Oh, I just
Yes.
imagine you just being like duct taped to this.
Tape
I'm
him-
like,
tape
how,
him to
how
the
is this
pillar.
wrestling training? Yeah.
No.
You'd be surprised. Wrestling can get kind of.
Yeah. And so I'm running forward, and I miss it barely. And the coach is like, "Boatright, go again." And so I hear it I'm sure he didn't have that accent, but in my mind. And and I'm running forward, and I go to tag it again, and I get it, and I'm like, okay, good, I did it. And I'm backpedaling, and I trip, and I come and brace myself with my left hand, and I hear this pop. And I'll never forget it because I come up and I'm like a little bit in shock, and he's like unstrapping me, and he's like, "Go get back in line." And I'm like, "I think something's wrong with my wrist. Like, I don't know what's going on."
That little ball in your wrist is definitely more pronounced than
they,
ours.
They probably can't see it, but like
Yeah.
it's much, much bigger. And the growth plate had cracked and popped out of like my wrist.
Wow.
Thankfully, it didn't break the skin. But I remember looking at it, and there was like a jut of bone down there. And I was like, I don't think that looks right. And I'm probably in shock at that time a little bit. And I go get back in line, and thankfully, unfortunately, I don't even know who it was. Someone was behind me in line. I think obviously did the drill right after me. Came behind me, and I'm still looking at my wrist. And he was like, "Yeah, that's broken. That's definitely broken." And he ran and got the coach, and went to the hospital and got a cast, and the rest is history.
To answer your question, which sport I like the best, I would say I'm in the middle of I love sports and I didn't like any of them. Probably as a kid, I liked basketball the most. I just like shooting. I like shooting the basketball and into the hoop. The practicing that and then getting to do that in practice or in a game. And then we had a basketball court in our basketball goal in our driveway, and so there's some great memories playing with Dad and playing with each other, just 21 and gotcha and all these different games and chasing countless balls into the neighbor's yard. And probably basketball has the strongest. Yeah. What about you?
Well, football's obviously what I've done the longest, played since I was 7. Been a part of my life every single fall since then. But if I had to go out and play another sport for enjoyment tomorrow, it would probably be lacrosse.
I knew you were going to say that.
I loved it. It was football with sticks. I mean, that's the way we played it. I mean, run around. I was on defense, so I had the extra long defensive pole, and I enjoyed it so much. Just never got to score, really. They said, "Hey, you you're the guy that needs to pass the ball. You don't need to run down the court.
You won't make it.
Yeah, you don't need to cradle this ball past midline. You pass it. And so I did. I played my role, but I love the contact. I love the whole just premise of it. To me, it was like kind of a mix between soccer and hockey a little bit. Mm-hmm. And we traveled for it. I mean, I can remember coming down and playing a tournament in Birmingham, and there was just so many cool experiences. Loved the teammates, loved the coaches. Ultimately made the decision to no longer play in high school, but I had a really great experience with it. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah. I actually, in my later years, lacrosse I really enjoyed as well. I liked lacrosse, and I also have I also quit to do like track and field for conditioning for football, and that was a big regret in my life because lacrosse was something that I really enjoyed. I was telling you guys yesterday when we were having that lunch that I have discovered something recently about myself, that I enjoy being a participator more than a spectator. And for me, football, everyone's playing the sport, sure. But there are like 3 to 4 people who are touching the ball and 2 to 3 people who are involved in the tackling of the guy with the ball. Well, maybe sometimes 1. And in my head, those are like the most participatory roles in the sport. Offensive line is blocking, sure. Defensive line is trying to get past. Everyone's playing a role. It is a team sport. But in lacrosse, everybody gets a chance to touch the ball. You're not touching the ball as a left tackle. You're not touching the ball as anyone on the offensive line, and very rarely on the defensive line. And in lacrosse, the defensive person, the person who's in hey, you're the big guy, go hold that big stick and just block the area, that guy still gets a chance to be involved in the play, to put the ball in their possession and give it to their teammate. So in the sense that they are both team sports where you're working as a team to score a goal or achieve something, lacrosse, in my opinion, includes every player in the direct contribution of interacting with the ball or with the item that the sport's centered around in a direct way. And I think that felt so much more enjoyable for me. And I just regret quitting to do a conditioning for another sport that I wasn't even that passionate about, wasn't that good at, didn't play a lot, get a lot of playing time in. I really wish I would have stayed with lacrosse. I really enjoyed playing lacrosse.
I've got to defend my position a little bit here. So offensive line is one of the few positions in all of sports that the main goal, their main function has nothing to do with the football. They don't have to get the football. They don't have to tackle the football, intercept the football, receive the football, hand the football off, or pass the football. There's one guy on the offensive line, and the first thing he does with the football is give it away to somebody else who's arguably more talented than he is. All right, so you've got a very special culture in my mind that has to be cultivated among that arguably 5 and sometimes a tight end or an extended offensive line set 6 to be able to function. And the best thing about the offensive line is that game cannot be played the way it's meant to be played without an offensive line. And so that's why I love that position so much, is because you're by nature a protector. By nature, you're selfless. Oftentimes you want people in that position who are larger physically. They're intelligent and they're able to solve problems on the fly. They communicate well. They're able to articulate and diagnose defenses and solutions to problems the defense is giving you, everything from stems, stunts, pressures, blitzes. So I love that position so much. And if I had to do it all over again, you could say any position on the whole football field, what do you want to be? I'd still want to be a center on the offensive line.
That's an interesting perspective. I think it and I value it. I think it reflects too a personality difference, not just between you and I, but between, of course, body, physiological. Your wide receiver has a different body type than a left tackle, of course, but it represents different motivations on why we play sports. I want to be as involved as possible. If I could redo it and do everything again, I'd want to be a quarterback. Not because I think I could be more athletic than the quarterback when I was in high school, but I want to be as involved mentally and as a part of the play as possible. And I think that fits my personality type more. If I could do lacrosse again, I would be a midi or an attack. If I could choose, a different body type, a more athletic build. I think I would always want to be, it goes back to what I was saying. I enjoy podcasts, listening to them, but I far more enjoy sitting here and having these meaningful conversations because I am a constant direct contributor Whereas when you listen to a podcast, and I listen to podcasts, or when you watch a movie, I watch movies, you are a spectator. Maybe that's why I like video games as well, because I'm a participator in the action. Yesterday we played an old game, Star Wars Battlefront 2, and to me that's way more enjoyable than watching a movie, us three and Dad in the basement, because I'm participating, but I'm participating with the three of you guys, and we're doing something collaborative, and at the end we're doing something a little bit adversarial where we're playing against each other, and it just feels much more immersive. And not that offensive line is not immersive, it is very immersive, but when you are heavily involved in basketball, everyone touches the ball, everyone gets a chance to shoot. Maybe as you get more and more professional, you have people who are assist people and pass people, but everybody is involved in touching the main point of the sport. And I think for my personality, that's something I really enjoyed. I never really loved wrestling. We all wrestled a couple years, but it's a one-on-one sport. I do enjoy, I think the similarities is we do enjoy team sports. I just always wanted to be in a more contributive role, a more heavily participative role. And I think that carries to multiple areas of my life. What about you, Ethan?
I never liked team sports, like in general. So I think I liked wrestling because it was me versus another person. And even then, I didn't really like it that much. I think probably the individual sport, which is definitely a different answer, I think maybe from both of you, regarding these team sports and your interactivity and the actual function of the sport, or like, you know, how you're interacting with the ball or scoring, is probably rock climbing. Just because it's really me. Like there's nobody else that's really engaged in it. It's me and whatever I'm climbing. And even then, like I was really mostly in the gym. I think I went outdoor a few times. I think one time with you, actually, when we were in Birmingham.
Yeah, we did.
But most of the time it was just in the gym, looking at pre-laid out routes, determining like, hey, how do I do this? And it's both mental and physical in that respect. And it was also felt very slow, so very calculated, rather than even something like wrestling where it's like you have to react very fast. You're also wrestling against someone else, so there's a little bit of a pride where it's like I'm losing, and I hated losing. I think everyone probably hates losing in some capacity, but getting pinned was like, I don't ever want to do this again. I want to go do something else. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why I resonated with wrestling so much, because it's me. It's really me, or in a way, me versus the wall, me versus the specific route.
Rock climbing, you mean?
Yeah, rock climbing,
Yeah.
yes. Versus something like wrestling, where I'm not facing an individual. It's my own capacity and ability that I need to develop. And that's either retrying the route, rethinking about my strategy on how to get to the end and then climb back down, or just getting stronger and doing other routes that are maybe things that I've already done before, things that I have the capacity to do in order to get stronger, to be able to finally complete that route. And I think specifically with rock climbing, once I was able to complete a particularly difficult route or something that was previously beyond my strength, it was a feeling that I had that I did not get from any other sport, even like weightlifting now, where I'm in the gym, it feels good to squat, it feels good to bench, whatever. But there was something about rock climbing where it's like I figured it out. I watched other people maybe who were in the gym doing it, and I was like, oh, I see what he did, I can do that. And that level of like against myself being able to do it really was, I guess, like a reward system that I really enjoyed.
Yeah. I love that. Before we go, I have one final question for you guys. What's one memory that you have of the three of us that is the most, the one you cherish the most? I'll go first so you guys have time to think. There are several that come to mind, but we grew up in a household where our parents worked their butt off so that we could go on one vacation every year. And that vacation was the same spot. My dad, our dad, had a timeshare, good or bad or ugly. He had a timeshare in Orlando, and we would go virtually every year, and not even always go to the parks. Sometimes we would just go to maybe one park while we were there, or no parks at all, depending on the year and how the economy was, et cetera, et cetera. But one memory I have that stands out is the place in particular had a couple pools, and we would always hang out at the pools. And there was one pool had a volleyball net, another pool had the hot tub, and it was just this escape from routine and normalcy in life. But it was a place for us to play and connect. And of course, our parents have photos of us in those pools and as a family together. But I just remember playing in the water. We didn't have a pool in our house. We had a pool in our neighborhood we would go to sometimes, but for some reason, going on that vacation every year with the two of you and our parents, it was just it's part of the reason I love to travel today. And part of the reason I've made it a priority is because the memories that I have of family that are the strongest and most potent are of us as a family traveling. And I just love those memories. And I want to do that for my family as well. And hopefully the opportunity to do it with all of our families again soon, because it is one of the things I cherish the most. Growing up, swimming in the pool, playing games, just using our imagination. It's one of my favorite memories.
I can go.
You got it.
I think probably on that vacation, I have vivid memories of us in Disney Quest, which was like this AR, I mean, a lot of it was AR, but like digital games, like you could control like a little RC car. There was one floor that was like dedicated to Buzz Lightyear, and you could drive these go-karts around and shoot like cannons at each other. There were so many fun and amazing memories that we had there, and it was so incredible being able to go together and shoot cannons at each other while the other brothers are in one car and I'm with dad or whatever, or doing some of the VR games.
Pirates of the Caribbean.
Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yeah, shooting the cannons.
Yes,
we're
that
on
was
different
so
parts
much
of this
fun.
ship shooting these virtual skeletons.
Yeah. Dead men tell no tales. yeah, that was so much fun. And then I think probably another one from when I was really young is when we probably had a PlayStation 1, and we had that big, massive TV that I think mom and dad always said they bought when they first got married, that sat in what used to be my room, and we were up there playing, and I think y'all were playing like an Elmo game, and I remember sitting there just enjoying watching y'all hand off and play. And I think you asked me, oh, Ethan, do you want to play? And I was like, no, I just like watching. And I have this like vivid memory of like watching us all just interact with this game. And, you know you don't have like a deep passion for gaming, but that was definitely something that like has stuck with me, where it was like just this young brother moment where we're all there, we're all playing, we're all engaged, and we're not wrestling or fighting. It was just such a key memory for me.
Yeah.
I remember that Elmo game too. It was it was a wooden panel TV that had like these knobs you would turn.
Yes.
It was like from the 70s or 80s. That was old.
That was Dad's TV that Granny Mary bought him when he went to college.
Oh, was it college?
That's how old that TV is. He told me that. That's the same TV. Dad had a VCR, and he's my little league coach. It's the same TV. He would wake me up in the middle of the night, and like I guess Mom had already fallen asleep. I'm serious. I'd be dead asleep. He'd come in there, wake me up, and say, "Hey, we got to watch some film for the game tomorrow." And we'd be in there at midnight, and I would be just
That's funny.
Just exhausted. And he's like, "All right, so when the running back's on this side, you got to." I was playing linebacker. You got to set up and fit this gap, and just I have vivid memories of that TV.
Yeah.
Being very active in our childhood for multiple reasons, watching VHSs and playing games.
Absolutely.
And all the things. I think the memory, my memories are strongly tied to Orlando as well, but I think probably in a different capacity. I really enjoyed going to the parks, the Universal, Islands of Adventure. SeaWorld was Mom's favorite and my favorite. That was always really fun. But I appreciated as we got older, Mom and Dad were willing to kind of branch out and do different things. So like we started going to different beaches, right? Even though we went to Orlando, that's kind of where the spot that we stayed was. We started doing the go-karts when you guys were starting to be able to drive and I guess allowed to on the track or whatever. We started, I specifically requested I want to start going fishing. I want to do some deep sea fishing. And so we kind of started out doing the party boat thing. And then from there we graduated to, maybe more of a private charter where we're off trolling oil rigs, and we did it, in the Gulf and in the Atlantic. So those are memories of the progression of how those trips, the core of those trips stayed the same, right? It was our family. It was, relatively tight-knit outside of maybe the one or two occasional friend that came along. And then it was, how it's like, okay, well, maybe we're aging out of this parks. Let's start to do different things. Or maybe we just do one park and we do one beach and we go down to Titusville and we eat all you can eat rock shrimp. It was always, that was usually a staple as well. Dixie Crossroads. So You know, just there's things that made it special, but it wasn't the thing we were doing. It was the core of our family was together, and we were in relaxation mode. And whatever we did together, it was going to be a good time. Whether we had to, you know, dip into the video game world, the entertainment world, or the outdoor world, you know, we could all kind of be there together and enjoy those things. So that's what I remember most about it.
I love how all of our answers is about travel, vacation time, really away from our home with family. I saw something recently that it said that kids will remember, especially like age 6 to maybe 12 or 13, they will remember vacations so much more than presents or gifts or other things you could do, because it's those core memories that you build and develop that will last a lifetime. I might remember 1, 2, or 3 birthdays from my childhood, like vividly, but I remember multiple of those vacations, going to Disney Quest, going to Universal, doing the go-karts, going to SeaWorld, going deep sea fishing, playing in the pool, playing volleyball at the other pool. They compound because it's almost like they get deposited into a deeper part of who we are, because they are memories that we make. And like Grandma Mary would always say, we're making memories. And she would usually say that in a adverse condition would pop up, like if it's raining at a picnic or something like that. But it's true, good and bad. When you're with the ones you love and you're with family, you are making those memories that last a lifetime. And I'm happy to have had those memories with you guys.
Yeah.
And look forward to many more on the horizon.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you guys for being here so much. Ethan and Jordan, my 2 brothers, I'm glad you came. Thank you for being the first inaugural, I don't know if inaugural is the right word, but the first episode with 3 people. I really enjoyed it. I wouldn't have done it any other way. You have given me some thoughts worth holding on to, and I appreciate you being here.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoyed it.
Thanks.
Hey, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe so that you can be notified every week when we launch new episodes. I'll see you then.